Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Here from Israel, Sasha Reutemann, the CEO of the Combat Antisemitism Movement, for this security briefing on the Israel response to the Iranian attack, but also the ongoing efforts that Israel is doing right now, also to bring back the hostages and to defeat Hamas since October 7. We have been doing a lot of briefings since October 7 to you, decision makers, leaders, legislators, to provide you with the most accurate information of what's happening here on the ground from Israel. Unfortunately, the challenging situation are continuing, and we have more issues to share with you. So today we have two very important speakers that are leaders in their field, and we are very grateful that they find the time to be with us today. First, I would like to introduce Major General Tamir Ayman, former chief of the IDF Intelligence Directorate, 34 years in the IDF, with an impressive career, but also today serves as the managing director of the INSS. INSS is the Institute for National Security Studies, very impressive institution that is really building the best policies on security issues across the Middle East and around the world. So thank you, Amir, for joining. We also have today Aryeh Lightstone. Aryeh Lightstone is one of the unique leaders that can really pretend, that has been behind forging the Abraham Accords together with the ambassador, David Friedman. He was his senior advisor, but also as a special envoy of the US government on economic normalization in the Middle East. And I think that you've really helped building what we have seen, the coalition in action the past Saturday night. So thank you both for being here today. And I think that we have a lot of issues to share. We're going to try to be brief under the 45 minutes, until the 40 minutes, probably around 35 minutes. So if you have any questions, it's the opportunity to ask our wonderful guests and speakers on any issues that you think that you need more knowledge or you would like to know to help doing your work better. So I would like to start first with Major General. If you can provide a short analysis on the two main fronts of the past week, from the north to the south, when we have Hezbollah that yesterday launched an attack on a Bedouin and a Druze village with sending more than 18 people to the hospital, but also on the retaliation of Israel in Iran and the situation with the IDF operation in Rafah, which is very controversial these days around the world. So please, Major General, if you can share.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. And I'll try to be very brief because we are short in time. I'll go over the two main arenas, and maybe if we have some more time, I'll discuss regarding Lebanon. Let's start with Iran, first of all. A little bit word of context, just for your information. All of the frictions that we are encountering right now towards Iran began after Israeli killed the senior commander of Quds Force in the northern front. It's not we are not in a routine time. We are during the wartime, and that senior commander named Hassan Madavi was the operational commander that coordinated attacks on the northern parts of Israel. He was not innocent, and he was involved in active active war against Israel, active operations against Israel. Secondly, another misleads by the fact that it was so-called consulate. It was not a consulate. It was the command post of the Corps, Quds Force Corps 18,000s, codenamed Yas. It's well known as the commanding post of the Iranian in Damascus. Everybody knows that. No consulate and no bullshit, sorry for my language. And that Madavi was not involved in issuing visas in consulate. He was in his command post. But in order to get the so-called authority of attacking Israel from as a sovereign state from Iran soil, they use this as excuse, as Chapter 51, like it is some form of diplomatic infrastructure where it practically it is not. The barrage was intercepted in a dramatic success. Only 1% out of the missiles succeeded in launching, hit Israel. We are talking about 6 missiles out of the over 300 warheads that were fired towards Israel. No major injuries whatsoever. And right now, the Iranians are more and more acknowledging their failure, and it creates some form of despair, but that's in the operational levels, in the level of the supreme leader and the higher echelons of command. They are still in a euphoria mode because they have acted against the deterrence or the attempts of deterring them by United States and Israel, and that considers to be a sign of honor, a sign of bravery. And they are, and in the more strategic level, they think that they have gained another tool in the toolbox in order to deter Israel and maybe achieve some form of superiority in the tactical operation level against Israel. So right now, we are expecting the retaliation of Israel. So for digging into the tactical elements, what are our strategic objectives in creating that counter-attack or the retaliation? First of all, we must rebalance the deterrence against Iran. The fact that Iran has some form of a self-confidence that in some way it is superior over the Israeli forces. It's a threat. It is a threat to Israel, but not just for Israel. Strong Iran that has a sense of efficiency and sense of capability is a danger to the region. It's a danger to the Middle East. This is why it is not just in the Israeli interest to rebalance the deterrence equation. It is the interest of all of the regional countries in the Middle East. So that's one objective. Second, we must not divert our attention from the main arena of the war, which is Gaza. In Gaza, we have still not obtained all of our objectives of the war. And right now, to escalate into a full direct confrontation in front of Iran, it's counterproductive to what we want to achieve in Gaza. So that's another element. And third, and I think very important, the international coalition that worked with Israel in order to defend Israel is really imaginable. If I cannot really imagine all of the region, Arab states, together with United States, working in a perfect harmony in order to tackle Iran aggressiveness in the Middle East. It seems like a chapter from the book of Shimon Peres from the 80s. I don't know. That's really unimaginable, but it happened. It is reality, and while retaliating, we do not want to break that coalition that worked for the first time, because that's the root, that's the potential for a new regional architecture after the war in Gaza. And especially, we do not want to contradict the United States interest, because the United States backed Israel in an unprecedented way for the second time. So after, of course, there are tensions between those different objectives. So what can we do? First of all, we do not have to rush things up. Time is working to our favor. The tension in Iran is building up. The criticism over the government of the regime of Iran is scaling up, and the frictions there are in our interest. Second, we must not exploit this opportunity, like some people recommend, to destroy Iran, because we need Iran, we need United States in our backing, and I don't think it is in the United States interest right now during election year to go to be involved in a full-scale war with Iran, the most powerful nation in the Middle East. I think that it will create dramatic frictions between us and the United States. So we have to work something in between. So what there is, all of the realm of clandestine operations, secret operations, sabotage, bombing, etc., all of what we know to do pretty well, and to continue striking Iran facilities all across the Middle East, especially in Syria. And if there will be an opportunity to kill commanders, senior commanders of the Quds force that works against Israel, we should not be deterred to do that, and to, by that, presenting to the Iranians that they have not succeeded in the strategic goal. Regarding Gaza, everything is interconnected. Situation right now in Gaza, two main problems. One, Sinwar, who holds the cards of the hostage, is feeling that the war is about to end because international pressure against Israel. So this is why he enhanced his preliminary conditions for a hostage deal, changed the rules, and right now it seems like he has no intent, will, to go to a hostage deal. And Bill Burns, the director of the CIA, is well aware of that fact and is disappointed, as all Israelis are. Real major problems. So we are stuck in the avenue of ending the war through a hostage deal, which is the main strategy of the United States. That gives us that in order to do that, we now must enhance our operational pressure. That leads us to the Rafah issue. In order to carry out the mission in Rafah, you must, first of all, allow the displaced Gazans to go northwards. That involve of letting 1.1 million people to evacuate themselves. It will take time, and I imagine we will start doing that in the next few days or weeks. Second, you must ensure with the Egyptians that we have no intention to push them to Sinai Peninsula. After doing those two things, we will probably see operation in Rafah in the upcoming weeks or month, unless we get some sort of a break from the United States, and I don't think that is the case. I think that the United States wants us to work in Gaza. They also share our objective to destroy Hamas to the end, but they want a different method, and they want to ensure that there will not be some form of a catastrophe in terms of humanitarian problems. So we must ensure that, and I hope that if we will increase our pressure, in one hand, create a new line of negotiation with Hamas and give the negotiating team more leverage to negotiate. And third, and that's the missing part of all that element, create some sort of a rivalry or competition to Hamas in the terms of the civilian authority in Gaza. Right now, as long as he's not being competed, no adversary, he knows that it's only a matter of time that the war will end. And it will resurface, Hamas will resurface and take control over the Gazan civilian element. So due to lack of decisions making, we have still not made a decision. The cabinet, the Israeli government, has not really made the decision who is the alternative civilian address in Gaza. And that's the third element of pressure. By the way, from all the three negotiating operation in Gaza, alternative address is the most effective way to pressure Sinwar, because that's a threat to his survival as the entity that controls Gaza. Last, the situation in the north. Practically nothing changed dramatically. Okay, Hezbollah participate in the attack in Saturday night in the minimum way available to him by barraging the Golan Heights. After that, he continued in the policy of creating the friction above the level of casualties, below the level of a full-scale war. We have used a few opportunity and killed two of his in the level of the brigade commanders. We killed two of them, one regional commander. They are retaliating with UAVs over Arab al-Aramsha, a Druze village in the north, injuring about 18 people. We retaliate dramatically in several places in Lebanon, even with a very, very deep, long strike. But overall, that friction continues. The same problems are still the fact that we have evacuated our civilians from the northern part of Israel, which is the most dramatic strategic problem to Israel right now. And in the Lebanese side, the problem is that we are continuing to kill Hezbollah operatives. We have reached almost 300 of them are now killed. And it's an attrition war, and it will end only after the Gaza war will come to a ceasefire, and then we can somehow resolve the problems by withdrawing some parts of the Radwan forces away from the border and create some form of an arrangement with the United States. That's all in a very brief manner. I'll stop right here.
Well, thank you, Major General. First of all, it was impressive to go over the whole Middle East in 15 minutes. So thank you very much for that. And I just want to say that I share in the chat a video that was released yesterday in an Israeli news channel of Yarden Bibas that was kidnapped yesterday. And I think the impressive thing of this video is to see that everyone there are civilians, Gazans. They don't wear a uniform. They don't wear Hamas uniform or the Islamic Jihad uniforms. And we hear the numbers of Gazan killed, but we forgot to mention how many of them are terrorists. And it's very hard to differentiate between civilian and terrorists while the terrorists are hiding themselves into civilian areas. And I think it's a very important point. I don't know if you want to add anything about that before you leave, Major General.
I have to leave. I'm very sorry. It was a brief announcement. So I'm jumped in to make that presentation, and I have to run. So
thank you for this very impressive and interesting briefing, Major General. So thank you very much. So allow me to move on, and I would love probably to get first response from Ariel Eystone to what you heard now. Before we get to more questions, I'm sure that you have something to share about the United States perspective as an American and a former official from the American government. So please.
Yeah, first of all, Sasha, thank you. Your work is so incredibly important, and I wish that you'll go out of business soon. The prospect of combating anti-Semitism is something that I really thought was a thing of the past. We see it rearing its ugly head in meaningful ways, and so it's a real honor to speak to all of you decision makers that are here and have dedicated your time to pay attention to this issue. It's a niche issue. It is not something that affects most of your daily lives. But I will tell you, I think it affects the very fabric, the values, and the morality of what the United States of America stands for. I had the unique privilege and pleasure to work for the United States of America for 4 years. I represented the United States at our embassy that began in Tel Aviv and ultimately moved to Jerusalem, and then was part of the core team that created the Abraham Accords, brokering peace in between Israel and 5 countries in 123 days. And in those 4 years, there was nothing that I took more joy in than putting the US flag on my lapel every single day and walked around with enormous pride and confidence, representing the most moral, just, and righteous country in the history of the world. I will say it's moral and just because we have the ability to call balls and strikes appropriately. Once we lose the ability to do that, then we're just a very wealthy country that's got a lot of power, but I think we should be terrified how that power gets used. And that's really the context that I wanted to spend a couple minutes speaking with you about. There is a war, and that war started on October 7th, and Israel actually frankly lost that war on October 7th. Over 1,200 people killed, more than hundreds kidnapped, thousands injured, many of them in a way that will affect them for the rest of their life. And the scarring of the mentality of the Jews, frankly, throughout the world, but specifically those who live on the border, both with Gaza and in the north with Lebanon, and next to the Palestinian areas in Judea and Samaria, it's hard. And part of the foundation and the fundamental promise of the state of Israel is that Jews are not going to have to hide in cellars or attics anymore at the fear of being killed because they were Jews. And I'll just share the following piece before we get into, I think, the practical component of why we're here, hopefully working on this together. Nearly every day we have another family at our house who is a survivor or a first responder or somebody who lost somebody or somebody whose husband or wife or father or son is in reserves in order to be able to help them as we can. We spend half the year in Israel, so we contribute where we can. And just a couple of days ago, I was with a young lady who was lucky enough to be saved from the music festival, and she was saved because her father gave her timely advice: find the pile of dead bodies and hide under them. And I don't know what's in the DNA of this family where that is advice that a father can give from hundreds of kilometers away via WhatsApp to a kid, understanding instinctively that was her best chance of survival. And the promise of Israel was that parents and grandparents would never have to tell their children or grandchildren to do that again. And that promise was broken. So Israel lost the war on October 7th. It re-engaged in a war a couple of days later and has successfully prosecuted that war in a meaningful way. I'll be incredibly blunt over here. The United States of America has not stood with Israel in nearly a meaningful way enough. The United States of America has decided that it will support its ally. The United States of America has not come to the realization that this is also our war, and we have the unique honor and privilege that somebody else is fighting it on our behalf. And when I say it's our war, we lost over 30 citizens on October 7th, and we have at least 5 that are still hostages, unfortunately, likely at this point in time, not still alive. And we have a president who did show up to Israel in the middle of the war, and he deserves an enormous amount of credit for it. And I gave it to him then, and I give it to him still today. And then he sent a carrier group to the Mediterranean, and I gave him credit for that then, and I give him credit for that today. But here is where I think that we have a challenge. On the day that he showed up to Israel, he was also scheduled to meet with the leaders of Jordan, the leaders of Egypt, and the leaders of the Palestinian Authority, and all 3 leaders canceled on him and refused to meet with the president of the United States of America while he was in the region. Now, why did they cancel on him? Because the night before, there was a famous missile attack that the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and other luminaries reported an Israeli missile blew up the Indonesian hospital, incinerating 500 Palestinians immediately. That was the report with 100% certainty. How certain was that report? It caused protests and riots, not just in Amman, Jordan, and in Baghdad, Iraq, and in Cairo, Egypt, but on the Stanford University campus, the Columbia University campus, the Harvard University campus, Texas A&M campus, because Israel had just committed an act of intentional and willful killing of civilians. Now, about an hour and a half later, it was clear that it was not an Israeli rocket. It was clear it didn't hit the hospital. It was clear that 500 people were not dead, that it was a Hamas rocket that came up short that hit a parking lot that did destroy 12 cars, grievously injured 6 or 7 people, and perhaps killed 2 or 3 people. All of that is true. And that's a tragedy. Every death everywhere is a tragedy. I would blame all the deaths on Hamas, but we can talk about that specifics later. The point is that was news, that was a blood libel. And the president of the United States of America, instead of saying this is baloney, this doesn't make sense, we are standing by our ally Israel, and we are the #1 supporters of Egypt, of Jordan, of the Palestinian Authority. If you do not meet with me and figure out how to resolve this, then we will not have the same support for you on a go-forward basis. And from that moment, I turned to my wife and my kids and said, this is going to be long, and the United States of America does not have the moral fortitude with its leadership to stand. I want to also be clear. I worked for the previous president. I would have worked for this president if he offered me a position. I wake up every single morning and pray that whoever the president of the United States of America will be the greatest president of my lifetime, because I am an American way before I'm a Republican, way before, because the value of a strong U.S. is resonates throughout the world and resonates for Americans everywhere we are, and that should be our #1 priority. All of that being said, we have demonstrated meaningful weakness across the board, and even greater weakness when it comes to our college campuses and in our city councils, and when we've got protesters blocking bridges and access to airports and commutes on thoroughfares, and even to the point where the president, the secretary of state, and others have mimicked the numbers that the Hamas health ministry puts out. The Hamas health ministry. And just a moment ago, the major general who shared opinions, and he is a enormous patriot of Israel. I actually disagree with much of his strategy, but that's neither here nor there. He's the major general, I am not. It's the Hamas health ministry. I don't know why we are on April, what is it, the 17th today, and people are surprised that the 18th, and people are surprised that Sinwar is not a fair negotiator. How is this possible? He instructed his troops to behead children. I saw the heads. I saw the bodies. They were not attached. To rape both men and women. To commit atrocities that have I thought were banished from certainly 2024 in a meaningful way. And suddenly we're surprised that his word is not his bond as a legitimate negotiator. We look like fools to the free world. And on this battle of right versus wrong, when we do not project immense clarity, when we quote numbers from the Hamas Health Ministry, when we make statements about we hope that Israel follows the rules of international warfare, that's the implication that if we didn't warn Israel that perhaps they would not do so. All of those things are opening up the opportunity for anti-Semites to commit anti-Semitism. Again, I'm not excusing that. I'm just saying that when we, especially our leaders, which is why I'm so enthusiastic to be spending my evening speaking with you, speak with clarity, we put a line in the sand and we're willing to stand by that line. And having witnessed this in real time, we recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. We moved our embassy to Jerusalem. That did not lead to war in the Middle East. Speaking truth and clear truth led to peace, which leads me to this past Saturday night, because I want to share with you something that I think is absolutely incredible. The single largest attack in all of modern history of air warfare from one sovereign country to another sovereign country happened this past Saturday night in unmanned vehicles. The Iranians shot over 300 in between UAVs, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles. And I'll correct the Major General once more. There was a injury. There was a very serious injury of a 7-year-old Bedouin girl who is no longer fighting for her life. She's going to make it, but her life will be changed forever. That kid counts. And every one of those UAVs and ballistic missiles and cruise missiles were not softballs down the middle for the air defense to knock out of the park. They were aimed with the intent to murder. Not tens of people, not hundreds of people, not thousands of people, but tens of thousands of people. And had they gotten through the aerial defense, can you imagine what response Israel would have been forced to take at that point in time, and how many other tens of thousands of people would possibly get caught up in that? So now let me tell you why this incredible experience of Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, the Kingdom of Jordan, the United States of America, France, Great Britain, and Israel all coordinated together in order to be able to push back this incredible attack with enormous success. Not perfect. There's a girl who is still fighting for her life, so that is obviously not perfect, but with tremendous success. And the answer is on January 15, 2021, President Trump moved Israel into something called CENTCOM. The United States of America divides up its military responsibilities in various different areas around the world. Israel, up until that date, had always been in European command. Why was it in European command? Because we, as the United States of America, were nervous with the Jordanians, the Egyptians, and the Saudis be willing to sit next to the Israelis. It's not their command, it's our command. It's our generals, it's our coordination. We are offering this service to the world in order to create free trade and safety for our troops and our citizens around the world. And even with that, we allowed our number one ally in the region to be pushed out of the region and to go to Europe because they can sit with the Swiss and the Germans and the French. But that was inconsistent, because what would happen if we needed to coordinate an international effort to thwart Iran, which is the world's largest state sponsor of terror? Well, the president moved Israel into CENTCOM, which is focused on the Middle East. And for the last 3.5 years, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Israelis, and yes, us, the United States of America, have coordinated what would happen in this moment. And this evening came together as the capstone of all of those efforts. Think seamless coordination in between all of these countries is exactly what's supposed to happen when the United States of America leads and leads correctly. I'll leave you with 2 points, and then very, very happy to address specific questions that I see coming into the chat box right now. Only one peace deal has been negotiated in the last 3 years in the Middle East, and that was in between Iran and Saudi Arabia. That was in between Iran and Saudi Arabia, brokered by the Chinese. It's very difficult for us as Americans to acknowledge that the Middle East, which has been a place that we exert enormous effort and influence, now has meaningful influence from the Chinese brokering peace in between Iran, the largest state sponsor of terror, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a critical friend of the United States of America. And that weakened us throughout the region. However, I will share the following thing. Immediately after the war, I felt it was important that I travel to the Abraham Accord countries and to find out what it would be like for Jews traveling there, and then to ask them what it would be like for Israelis to travel there. I go everywhere with a kippah, with a yarmulke, with a head covering on as a fairly identifiable Orthodox Jew. And my first stop was Abu Dhabi, as they were the leaders of the Abraham Accords. And I have a friend in Abu Dhabi who happens to be a major general in the security forces over there. And I sent him a note asking if I can have a private meeting so I can go ahead and see what the situation would be from safety and security. He said, no, you can't have a private meeting. I'd like you to come to my modulus. The modulus is sort of their evening gathering session that they have. And I sent him a note. I said, 2 weeks after the war, I'm not really interested in going and sitting around and chatting with people. I want to go ask my questions. I want to get my answers. I want to get back on a plane and go be with my family. He says, you misunderstood me. I wasn't asking you to come. I was telling you to come. So like, okay, as long as you're telling me, I may as well go. Now, the protocol when you go to a modulus is that you start at the left and you say salam alaikum, and they respond alaikum salam, and you have to go around the entire thing till you get to the host of the evening, and then he places you where you're supposed to sit, and he moves. He's the MC. He coordinates the conversations and the discussions. And I'm like, okay, it's a 3.5-hour investment. I'll go. I'll do what I need to do, and it'll be fine. My car pulls up. The major general leaves his seat and he runs to the car door. He opens up the car door and he helps me out of the car and he gives me a hug and a kiss on both cheeks. And I see that there are two Instagram influencers on both sides taking pictures of this happening. And he takes me by the hand, and I don't start at the left. He takes me right to the front seat of honor next to him. And he has everybody else say salam alaikum to me, and I respond alaikum salam, like a greeting that only very high senior officials would get, and certainly one that I wouldn't warrant. And I turned to him and I said, I see what you did there, General. And he goes, I hope that you appreciate that. And the message he was sending is Jews and Israelis are as welcome in Abu Dhabi today as they were on October 6th. And we will protect all citizens, all visitors who want to come here and act in a way that is appropriate and respectful and tolerant of other people. And at that point in time, I had to wonder, maybe we should have him come and give lectures to the university system in the United States of America. Because I did this, it is far safer for me to walk around in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates with an identifiable Orthodox Jewish symbol on my head than it is for me to go on the subways of New York City or to approach to be a guest speaker on a college campus in the United States of America. And that should have all of us who care so deeply for the United States of America absolutely nervous about the values and the morality that have enabled us to be this shining light for the rest of the world when we are no longer that shining light. When people can shut down our highways and chant in favor, not of the Palestinians. I'm a big fan of the Palestinians. My family and I go to iftars to break the Ramadan fast as often as we can so we can build cohesion and interconnectivity in between people with respect. They come to my house for Shabbat and we go to their house to break the fast on Ramadan. But the people who are chanting for Hamas are not people who care about the Palestinian people. They're people who are violating crimes. And when we look the other way, when we see these crimes happen, we are demonstrating weakness domestically. And that same weakness is echoed internationally. And that's the last point that I just want to make over here. When we are not clear that we are with the United States of America is with Israel, and we will push back against people like Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah, that sets up a vacuum, and that vacuum is not filled by Costa Rica. That vacuum is filled by China, Iran, and Russia. And when that happens, the world becomes substantially less safe for everybody, and at the end of the day, for Americans above all. I really appreciate all of your time so much.
Thank you, Arjen. I have two questions here that I received, and I would like to share with you and hear your thoughts. First question is related to NATO, which we haven't seen as a regional player these days, and probably it makes sense. But first, the question: if Israel gets into a conflict with Turkey, where NATO will be, and why NATO is not involved when Israel is attacked with Iran, or maybe there is an involvement. And the second question will be related. We saw recently, I think yesterday, a bill on Congress related to making from the river to the sea, Palestinian will be free as a hate speech. How you feel about that? And maybe also to address what we hear a lot from legislators that are condemning Israel of committing a genocide, which is related to that. So if you can relate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so on great questions, thank you. On NATO doesn't affect Israel. Israel's not a NATO ally, and therefore, if there were to be a battle in between Turkey and Israel, that would likely break NATO. If you were to ask most NATO allies which side they would pick, it would be the non-NATO member, which would be Israel. But let's assume that's not the case. Normally, the yelling in between Turkey and Israel is far worse than the actual security cooperation and relationships, and I don't see that being an issue. I do see that NATO should lean heavily on Turkey and say, if you wish to remain part of NATO, perhaps you should be picking Israel and the side of Israel versus Hamas or Hezbollah or Iran. It's certainly in NATO's interest to be able to see Israel be stronger and more successful, more powerful on its own. Iran is directly partnering with Russia and China in the Russia-Ukraine war, and therefore every dollar that goes to Iran is ultimately fighting against Ukraine, which is terrifying to NATO. So that part, again, it should be clarity with our descriptions, but I don't think has much practical change. There should be at some point in time, and in the future, there should be a Middle East defense pact where you see Saudi, UAE, Jordan, Israel working together against the threats from Iran. That's in a later stage vision. In terms of Congress, it's hate speech. When you say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. So where do you want the Jews to go? And if the answer is, I don't really care, we don't say that about any other country at all in the world. So therefore, it's defined as hate speech. But that part bothers me even a little bit less. If you were to ask any of the protesters, what is the river and what is the sea? My guess is they don't know either of them. This is mostly a bunch of morons who have been indoctrinated into fancy chants that they believe something is true where it is not, which is why the concept of genocide is absolutely critical. If Israel wanted to wipe out all of the people of Gaza on October 7th in the afternoon, they could have done that. They have 100% air superiority, not 99%, 100% air superiority and unlimited bombs to be able to make this happen. The only thing that slows down Israel is they don't have enough smart bombs to make precision targeting to take out a specific window that hits a specific target while leaving the rest of the building intact. Israel has slowed down the war in order to be able to do that. Israel has sent troops door to door and house to house where it can knock down all of those houses with artillery, with missiles, with whatever else it would be. It risks its own young men and young women in order to protect Palestinian civilians. You are looking at it, and if we don't say this, then Hamas wins. And this is important for the United States of America to say this clearly, because they're coming for Western civilization next. What do I mean by that? Hamas perpetrates a war and then hides behind its civilians. And if the success of making sure that you never get punished for perpetrating a war is to hide behind civilians, then that will be the playbook that every other terror organization in the future will do. How do you think the Palestinian people, the Israeli civilians, certainly the Israeli government, as well as the Israeli army, cares far more for Palestinian civilians than the Hamas does? And the second the United States of America says, wait, don't finish in Rafah, so who's going to be in charge of Gaza after Israel doesn't finish in Rafah? Hamas will come back up. And what do you think life is going to be like for the civilians in Gaza after Hamas is back in power? It will be like it's been like for the last 17 years, which is all of the money will go to the leaderships in Doha, Qatar, and the rest of the money will go to build up a military. You notice they've got 37 hospitals.
I think that we have you can continue on a perfect question here, because we have Idan Zoran asking about the role of Qatar. So just starting with Qatar, and I'd like to jump on it. And the role of Qatar since October 7, also the US relationship with Qatar that exists. So how you can negotiate with Qatar to be in the middle of a conflict, and Qatar being with also Hamas. So how you see that?
Qatar is incredibly complicated. There are people who have security clearance higher than me who have opinions that I'll respect their opinions on this one. What I don't understand as America, I've got the leadership of Qatar sitting in the leadership of Hamas sitting in Qatar. They killed more than 30 of our citizens. They still hold hostage more than 5 of ours. How we haven't demanded that they are extradited to the United States of America to stand trial on crimes against humanity, I don't know. I'll say this as many times as I can possibly say this, because you are all people of influence, and you are all people who therefore influence people. You all remember the submarine that went down to check out the Titanic, which was a bathtub put together with duct tape. And we all sat riveted online, seeing the amount of hours of air that they may have left. Now, I felt for those people. I prayed for those people. My family prayed for those people. It was a tragedy. It was an unavoidable tragedy, but it was a tragedy. We don't care about the Thailand people. We don't care about the Israelis. Fine. As Americans, I've got 5 Americans who are living in a tunnel, being raped and assaulted and tortured. How is this not the number one thing on every single CNN and Fox and name whatever network it is? What do I care less because they're Jews? It's not true. I know that it's not. I know all of you don't care less, but it's become like a sideline. This isn't something. How many of us know the names of the Americans? How many of us are praying for each of those Americans each night? We should pray for all 133. We absolutely should. But because we haven't made that a priority, I'm terrified that they're not going to come out, and I shudder. I get physically sick. If they are still alive, what's happening to them today? And as Americans, we should be revolted and disgusted and enraged that that's happening. And I've got people on our college campus who are chanting in favor of that, and we're letting it happen.
So thank you, Aryeh, and we promised to finish after 45 minutes, and we are at 45 minutes. So I would like really to thank the participants, Aryeh, the Major General that left a bit earlier, and to all the Jews celebrating Passover, to wish you Chag Sameach and happy Passover. We're really working hard to fight for liberating the hostages, fighting for the security of Israel, and fighting anti-Semitism everywhere. And I think that in a critical moment that we need partners, we need allies to show up, to work very hard with us, and invite all of you to join us in this fight. You can contact us via our website to be in touch with me directly. My email is even on our website. And we're working with anyone that is interested to work on legislative affairs on the federal level, state level, or local government level, from the cities to federal institutions. So we're happy to collaborate on any ideas and initiatives that you have. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to our speakers today and to be a part of this briefing. Thank you.